Greetings, YTPC. It is Peter Piper, the True Light, coming to you on a beautiful Saturday afternoon at 16 hours and 15 minutes minus 5 hours Greenwich Mean Time for my global subscribers. Smoking some Newminster Superior Navy Flake in my Rossi Canadian. Going down good. Having a slightly wet martini. I say slightly wet because I've got a new recipe for martinis. And what I do is I get a little mason jar, you know, the kind we keep our tobaccos in, cleaned out, of course, run through the dishwasher, and pile in some olives stuffed with your favorite condiment. Mine are blue cheese and feta cheese. And then I fill the mason jar with vermouth. And I add a couple of bay leaves and peppercorn, whole peppercorns, and turn that around after sealing it up with the jar, and let that sit at room temperature in the cupboard, or the liquor locker, as it were, and then spoon out some of that vermouth after it's been blended into the cocktail shaker. Add your gin, which is, in my case, Tanqueray Rangpur, a very interesting blend with something called Rangpur limes. I think they're from India. And stir that with ice, strain it into the glass, and top it with some fresh ground pepper. Excellent. Anyway, it's been a while, hey? I guess I kind of went through a phase of not smoking my pipe. But I picked it back up, and I'm only smoking, well, once in a while, maybe once a day. Some days I don't smoke at all. But when I do, I really appreciate it. It's really, really nice. Anyway, I got a story for you blokes. And what will I title this story? I will title it The Job Interview from Hell. Back in, between 2001 and 2003, I had a bout of unemployment. And I was working as a contractor at the time. And I worked as a contractor for about 5 years in a consulting engineering capacity. And I got I decided I would probably be best to go direct with a company. And I was able to secure an interview with the Eastman Kodak Company up in Rochester, New York. At the time, I was living in Joppa, Maryland. Anyway, I'll try to keep it as short as possible and tell you just the highlights. Highlight number one, when I was on my way to the airport, BWI in this case, I got stopped for speeding, which is something that hadn't happened to me the whole time I lived in Maryland. I was going on like, close to 12 or 13 years at the time. State cop pulled me over on 95, gave me a ticket. I got to the airport. I was worried about catching my plane on time. And of course, this was right after, the 2001 terrorist attack. And I think I cut in line, tried to sneak in, cut in line. And some guy in the line called me out. So I had to go to the back of the line. Finally got onto the plane. It was JetBlue. Flight was pretty good. It wasn't too long from Maryland to upstate New York. Got my rental car at the airport. Drove to the hotel, which was a Holiday Inn. Checked in. And decided to do a dry run to the plant where I was going to have the interview, so that I'd know my way there in the morning. I think the interview was like at 9 or something like that. So I drove my rental car over there, and it was like right on the line of what you might call the other side of the tracks, and I guess the other side of the tracks. Okay, in other words, there was a poor section very close to the plant, and I drove around the block after locating the place of the interview, and a young woman, I was at a stoplight, and a young woman took a turn in from the left side and slammed into my car, a rental car. And it wasn't bad. It was it was hardly even reportable. It was like a scrape on the, I guess, the left rear fender of the car, which was fiberglass. And I think she left some marks on it, which I could peel off. And it was almost like I wouldn't even have to report this, but I did. I called the rental car company right away and reported the accident. After that, I went down to the bar and had a well-deserved drink. Had dinner that night at the hotel, and I think I got some kind of beef tips or something like that. They were tough, and it was a terrible meal, to say the least. They had a pool, so I went swimming to cool off. It was summertime. This was like in July. Got cooled off. Decided to go to bed early. Could not sleep. Um, they had these big puffy pillows, and I need a nice feather pillow to sleep on. I just got a lousy night's sleep, and the I couldn't close out the light from the windows. I think the Xerox company was across the way from my room. Terrible night's sleep. Woke up in the morning, went down to breakfast, and had another terrible meal. I think I tried to keep it light. Had some fruit salad, which was, everything was terrible. So I got all dressed in my suit, getting ready for the interview. Had my notebook and all that nonsense, and checked out of the room, and drove to the Eastman Kodak plant. Went into the lobby. I was the only one in the lobby, and it was kind of dark and looked like a place out of the 1940s or 1950s. And there was this big oil painting portrait of, I guess, Mr. Eastman, the tycoon of the company. Dead or alive, I don't know. Waiting to be interviewed. This guy came down. It's a real geeky looking guy. Now remember, I'm the only guy in the waiting area in the lobby. He totally ignores me. Goes over to the receptionist and mentions my name. And I guess she indicated that I was sitting there. She came over to me. I got up, shook my hand, introduced himself. So we proceed to walk over to the elevator, and get into the elevator, pushes the button, door closes, we start going up, and I just said, hey, so how you doing? No answer. So we go over to a conference room, and we sit down, and he looks over at me and he says, so what do you want to do? I told him I wanted to work as an electrical engineer for Eastman Kodak. And I think it was on the order of integrated circuit design. He asked me a bunch of questions, and he had an engineering notebook, and he passed it over to me, and he said, I want you to show me what you think the process would be for an integrated circuit design. So I sketched that out for him and handed it back to him. Meanwhile, we're all alone in this conference room, and they have one of those motion detector lights. I guess that turn off the lights if there's nobody in the room. So we're both sitting there, and the lights go out. Awkward moment. So he waves his hand around, and the lights come back on. So that didn't go too well. And then it was like a serial interview. If you've ever been in this same kind of situation, there's several different kinds. There's like a panel interview where a whole bunch of people gang up on you and ask you questions. And this was a serial interview where okay, this guy interviews you, then another guy comes in and interviews you. It was almost like a good cop, bad cop type of thing. He was the bad cop, and then the good cop came in, and we talked for a while, and that was okay. One of the stipulations for the job was that I had to take a polygraph test because apparently they did a lot of satellite work. Sounded like it might have been on the order of spy satellites and stuff. And it required a pretty high level security clearance. And they said if I didn't pass the lie detector test, the polygraph, that I'd be terminated immediately. An interesting thing that one of the guys said was that we were talking about like digital photography and analog photography, and he indicated, well, during our discussion, he said, which do you think is more accurate, the digital or the analog? And I said, well, I would think the digital. And he said, no. The analog photography, they're discovering now that they've looked at, what you might consider to be organic picture slides, negatives, whatever. And with the technology they had at the time, they could actually see things they couldn't see before because, the exposure basically captures everything down to, I guess, photon level or whatever. And digital photographic technology, of course, is limited by the pixel rate or resolution, and analog didn't have that limitation. That was one interesting thing that I took away from that interview. Oh boy. And then finally, I think I had to talk to the vice president of engineering, who had this really nice corner office with windows, on adjacent perpendicular edges of his office. It was a really nice office. Talked to him for a while, and the funny thing is that I had that lousy dinner and that lousy breakfast, and usually in an interview like this that would like pass through lunch, they would take you to at least the company cafeteria and feed you. But that was not the case. No, it passed. I got out of there like 1:30 or something like that without having anything to eat for lunch. So they didn't even give me lunch. And I think my last portion of the interview was a debriefing and asked what I wanted for a salary. And I think I underbid them by quite a bit because I was out of work for so long and I just wanted a job. And I would have had to relocate to Rochester, New York, or the surrounding area, which is not a place I would want to live. I looked at real estate prices. The taxes were like out of sight. And housing prices were okay, but taxes were out of sight. Pardon me while I relight. At any rate, I got out of there. And I was still in my suit. And I didn't want to travel back to Maryland in my suit. So I needed a place to change. I think I drove back to the hotel parking lot and did the best I could to get out of my suit, put on a pair of jeans and, a polo shirt or something like that. Which was awkward. And then I wanted to eat, so I drove to the nearest bar on the way to the airport. And I think I had something like a veal parmesan grinder or something like that. And several beers. Because at that point I needed a drink. But I didn't want to miss my flight. So I went to the airport and I was looking for a place to go to the bathroom because now I've had 3 beers. I gotta pee and I couldn't find any place to go. I drove past the airport. So I got into a side street and the Erie Canal passes through Rochester. So I found this, I don't know, kind of a parking lot, park kind of area. And went down to the canal with all this brown, brackish water passing through. Same water they use, I think, to make Genesee beer and ale. And I let go into the Erie Canal, and I thought that was a perfect signature for my exit from Rochester. But it's not over. Went to the airport, checked in. Of course, now they're checking everybody's baggage with swatches to detect bombs and everything like that. Like I said, this was late 2001 or 2002. I think it was 2002. No, this was 2003. Now that I think of it. So I get all checked in at the airport, and my flight was canceled. Why? Because there were severe thunderstorms in the area, either in the area there, no, in the area of Baltimore. So they canceled the flight. And the airline, I think it was JetBlue again, didn't do anything about that. So I grabbed my bags, and I didn't check a bag at the time. I just had a carry-on, and walked down the concourse and checked into a hotel off the concourse. And they had a pool and I think a hot tub too. And I just said, oh, fuck it. Um, what a day. Later, when I got home, finally, I had to file an expense report with Eastman Kodak, with regard to the interview expenses and travel. And yes, they covered the cost of staying at the hotel because of the canceled flight. And I came home, and that was that. Got a letter from him, a rejection letter, of course, thankfully, saying I did not get the job, which was truly a blessing. And later that the next month, I think I went to court for the traffic ticket, which they dismissed. And I paid the fine, and it didn't go in my record or whatever. And I think the next month was August, just around this time of year. And I got the interview call, I think, from another company, which eventually hired me and which I'm working for now. And doing very well. Doing very well. And it brought me from Baltimore back to Rhode Island, my home state, which I really wouldn't want to live anywhere else. Close to my mom at the time, my family. Great job. And the home of my dreams. So that's it. If you stayed with me this long, thank you. So remember to speak the truth, seek enlightenment, and God bless. Wow, 26 minutes. Take care, folks. Peter Piper, the True Light, signing off.